We as teachers have seen it. But what they've done, the hackers have done, is kind of disrupted that and had us go back to the old school way of teaching, which, you know, is not as prescriptive as it is, you know, reactive to the kids' needs.
But overall,
that part has been good.
But
Sorry,
overall,
Andreas.
I'm sorry. But overall, wouldn't that be a good thing? Like Dr. Kashani was saying, it shocks the system.
Yeah.
Like, the system has to rethink, and that's what we actually wanted to do, and that's what we're trying to get together and do. So
Yeah,
you got to look at the good from the bad, right? But
yes,
it affects people like you, which is the bad.
Well, in some ways, we're hacking the system, aren't we?
Yeah, exactly. You could look at it. Yeah.
We're trying to.
Yeah.
Trying to, yeah.
Anyway, that took a lot of time. I didn't mean for it to, but it has been a challenge because you can't even connect with the kids. That was the part of it that was challenging for those of us in all of our schools.
Yeah, well, as they say, this too shall pass. Yeah. Like everything else. We're still dealing with a pandemic too, you know.
Yes.
Third world nations are going this way. All the US is going this way. And then at some point we have to turn and help them out. Because if they go down, the virus doesn't discriminate. They'll come back, and then this will go down as well, and all the rest of it. But then again, maybe Schopenhauer was right. Said that the human existence was an error.
Was a what? I'm sorry, I missed that. Was a what?
Error.
Probably see it so.
Yeah, you didn't have much faith in humanity, I guess. Yeah, but, yeah. Unfortunately, the history of humanity kind of supports that argument. But there is the other side of humanity, and hopefully, all of us are on that other side. Our hope never dies, and we keep pushing. Yeah. That's how we give meaning to our lives. Otherwise, you know, what's the point? Right? Why get together like this? All right.
Make money.
Power. Make money. Yeah. Power. Yes. I wanted us to discuss power a little bit today. So let's see if we get a few more people. Let's hang in there for a few minutes and see who else comes in before we get the official start going here. But in the meantime, I see a toddler being tossed around in front of the camera.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Well, we can say hello. Yeah. Are you your child? Who is that, Ellen?
Oh, that's my youngest, Elliot.
Elliot. How old is Elliot?
Elliot just turned 3.
That's a good age. They talk and they demand.
Worse than 2-year-old. No, he's fabulous.
Look, Karen has a 20-year-old named Elliot. So you're in good company. Anything exciting happened to you guys other than, you know, the story of the cyber robbery and all that? Let's see if anything positive happened in your lives. It could be as simple as, oh, I had cheesecake yesterday and it was wonderful. You know? What do you think?
I finally put together some collages to enter in our local Museum of Art's juried show.
Beautiful.
I've never shown my work before, so.
Oh, very cool.
I'm practicing new things to keep myself agile and nimble, and that's how I'm doing it this time.
Yeah, you'll have to share some samples with us.
I'll have to get releases from all of you because what I call art, some people may be offended by. So, but yeah, I'd be happy to share it with you.
So you share, and then afterwards you have to shoot us? Is that what happens?
I'll give a trigger warning and people can leave or their camera.
Anybody else?
So the cross tournament season starts, so that's where I am right now. So it's 90 degrees in Maryland. great day to watch a lacrosse game or 3.
Oh, wow. Yeah. When you
My-
say 90 degrees, is it also humid? Because that area.
Yeah.
is just- oh my
Pretty
God.
humid. So my child plays, and then my husband is the head coach. So we're in it to win it.
That's right. That's right. You deep in it. You have to win it. Win or go home. That sort of thing. That's wonderful. That's great.
Hey, Kimberly, is that normal? 90 degrees right now in Maryland right now?
So maybe not for the first weekend in June. No, it's not. It has not been this hot all week. And then anyone else on the East Coast, like we had like Memorial Day monsoon weekend where it was 50 degrees. Yeah, it went all up and down the East Coast. But I mean, yeah, June is hit or miss. It's pretty nasty out.
Yeah,
But we're all tented up.
it's
like we've
90 in
got our-
Pennsylvania too.
Is it? Yeah, we got
Yeah,
our tent
that's
city.
not normal.
Yeah.
Ah,
It's also really hot in St. Louis. We had the 50 degrees in Memorial Day, and now we're up to 90. So we had the same weather pattern. But on the positive side, I have baby tomatoes,
baby tomatoes.
size of like a pencil eraser right now. But it's just exciting that they're on their way out and we should have tomatoes by the end of June if this hot weather continues. Followed by rain spells to keep them nourished. So, and then I have volunteer cantaloupe plants that just volunteered to come back from last year's seeds, just sprouted out of pots kind of crazily. And so it's exciting.
Okay, so I think we have the critical mass here, 15 people, including yours truly. Let's see who's missing. Okay, Emily was doing something with she was at the vet and she said, getting a passport for the cat or something like that. So she'll join us late. But let's continue. Some little positive things that happened to you this last week or the week prior, perhaps.
It was 50 degrees here Memorial Day weekend, but I was not here. I was in St. Croix, the Virgin Islands. So that was fun.
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gearing up to head to Aruba in another week, so I am very much looking forward to that little break.
Yeah, good for you, Natalie.
I this past week finished a 6-week-long project building a cob oven with kids, and we fired it on our last day of school and had a pizza party, and it was amazing. Worked quite well. I thought it might collapse, but it's ancient technology and it stood up.
What's a cob oven?
It's an oven built out of sand and straw and clay that heats to very high temperatures and that you can cook in for hours and hours.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that.
They're pretty excited. It's been something I wanted to do for a really long time, and it pumped out 30 pizzas and could have kept going.
Holy shit.
Little pizzas, but
You gotta send us a picture of that. Yeah. Yeah, I think I want to build myself a cob oven. Well, I have something positive to share. Last Friday, our son, Hayden, graduated from high school.
Hey.
Yeah, he's, I'm proud to say, like a proud papa, that he's a salutatorian of the school. He gave a speech. It was a wonderful speech. And I didn't help him with the speech. He wrote the whole thing. It's about the meaning of life and all the rest of it. And this is a particularly special moment in our lives because he's in a school, or was in a school, graduated, of all gifted students. So to be a salutatorian, the cream of the crop of the cream of the crop is kind of like, holy shit, we're really doing this. So it was a very special moment for us. We're very proud of him. And all the credit goes to him. He's an automatic pilot, does his own thing. And it's always wonderful. And it's a blessing. You know, I thank the universe, God, whatever forces are helping us out. You know, it's just wonderful. You know, the existence in this universe is a mystery. It's always a mix. You got famine around the world. You have overabundance in things in other parts of the world. You have sadness and you have happiness, and you've got justice and you have injustice. Unfortunately, the balance, is tipped towards injustice mostly, and then justice. And that's why we're here, right? Working on stuff towards social justice, etc. But at the end of the day is night. But at the same time, I always say this to my undergrad students, because they're kind of like, you can trick them this way and go, "What time is it?" And they go to their clock or watches. "Oh, it's 11:15." And no, and then I keep going at it. Time is now. And so, "Where are you?" I go, "Well, I'm in Los Altos. So I'm in Palo Alto." No, you are here. So it's the here and now that matters. So on that note, we are here and it is now. So shall we get to it? You want to get serious and talk about this radical, critical inquiries and approach to education, how we're going to change the world, and we're going to be the revolutionaries that produce the future leaders of the world. And of course, you guys, once you get your licenses, which is that EDD degree, and you become doctors, you are the leaders, right? You're going to make the changes happen, right? So you're going to be the direct agents of change, and so forth. And that's all it is. I mean, right now you're doing the work anyways. You are making changes. Many of you are in the classroom, as they say, in the trenches, to use the war metaphor and so forth, and are actually shaping lives in many ways. But with that license, certain doors open, and then you can enter those through those doors and enter new spaces, and then wield power, right? I just want to say a couple of things about power, because I've been reading your stuff, and I'm very pleased that everyone is engaged. I am, and the credit goes to you. You are engaged because you're committed to this work. And I appreciate that you appreciate the readings. And I appreciate that you also bring up new dimensions to the readings and to the work that's there, because the work will never be complete, right? It's never comprehensive. So told, there'll be things that are missing. And this is where you come in. And then you say, well, I want to talk about this, I want to talk about that, to augment the work that we're doing. And the next thing you know, the synthesis gives us a new way of seeing things. And we look at the old questions and we realize that we've come up with better questions now. And the questions are enhanced. And then we start chipping away at the questions. And then we generate even newer questions. And of course, the perpetual inquiry in which we are involved is about just questions after questions and after questions. And the process itself is that changes us, so we personally transform, and then by way of that transformation, we affect others, and ideally, they transform as well. I mentioned Michel Foucault, a couple people. Lisa, was it you that I was mentioning? Somebody, I forget, I didn't make a list, but I wanted to talk about, because when we were talking about the education system, either being broken or being designed to oppress and to create, future functionaries, and some people make the argument that it was always designed to work this way, post, industrial revolution, to create workers, to create, the middle class, bureaucrats, for the machinery, and capitalism has always been the umbrella under which education systems have been produced and designed. Others argue that no, we've had liberal forces that wanted masses to be liberated from the oppressive systems of the old, and making capitalism more of a democratic project, which is kind of like a oxymoron to say, well, capitalism can be democratic. Capitalism is never democratic, but that doesn't mean that humanity hasn't benefited from innovations and businesses and things that have changed the world and so on to make lives better. But lives better for whom is the question, right? For how many, to what extent, and all the rest of it. All of that aside, here we are, and it is now. And what can we do as either educators or leaders of educators to learn from various theories and systems and practices and actual cases that we can create a synthesis for new models of teaching. You know, sometimes people defend their own methods and their own theories to the point of, no return, as if like their method has to be the best and everything else is bad as a result. I have found, as a result of not only as a teacher, but also someone who looks at these things and teaches. And the best way to learn anything is to teach it, of course. Right? And you guys can disagree with that if you like, but I'm going to stick with that story. I learned that we can benefit from all methodologies, right? You know, we tend to be anti-memorization and rote learning and all of that. But I remember as a child, I grew up in in the elementary school years, I went to a private school in Iran, and it was based on the French system. And so they would make us memorize poems. Like this was an ongoing thing. It wasn't like, once a semester or once a month or anything. Every week we had to recite poems. And then we had to write and repeat things that were given to us by books, so rote learning in some ways. But when I think back, I realize that that really helped me wire my brain to a point where I can absorb things quickly. I can read a couple pages of a book and absorb it. And then now that I have the analytical skills developed to a point where I can think about these things, then I can respond to what I have memorized. So there is some benefit to that. Now, if the education becomes only that, certainly it's destructive. But can we not learn something from that method? Then there is the other methods, like in Finland, for instance. I know a few things about Finland's system because I have very close friends that are educators in Finland. They've had success. They didn't used to. Their system was a failure 25 years ago. But today, they are one of the best systems in terms of K through, pre-university work. And what they do is kids don't go to kindergarten. They start school at the age of 7, right? So they start reading and learning to read at age 7. And it's kind of like the Waldorf system or a Montessori system where the kids are allowed to explore, right? And the teacher, of course, it plays an integral role. And a teacher has a great let's just say social status in Finland. A teacher has the same status as, say, a brain surgeon would have. People get really excited when they meet a teacher at a party, all right? And not so excited when they meet a brain surgeon. Yeah, brain surgeon, you just go into the skull and okay. Oh, teacher, yeah, you work with kids. And what do they do? How many languages do they learn when they come out of your classes and all this stuff? So they've had a great system that has worked. How much can we learn from that system? Because our system sucks, right, as a whole. So and I think everybody agrees that we've got serious flaws within our system, big holes. Hardworking, dedicated teachers and administrators, to that extent too, not all administrators are evil, try so damn hard to work within the system to open it up. They realize they have power, But then there's other systems of power that come in contention with their power. And so it's the power struggle that they're dealing with. I don't know to what extent you guys are familiar with Foucault. Is the French historian, philosopher, psychologist, etc. You know, let's call him a thinker, who in the late 1970s gave a series of lectures predicting what would happen in the Western world today, and meaning neoliberalism taking over. Neoliberalism, the short word for it. I've got like a 45-minute lecture on that. I'll send you guys the YouTube link. If you like, you can take a look. Neoliberalism is market fundamentalism, right? You guys have talked about this. We did it in the first couple of weeks, and we're doing it in the second couple of weeks. We're talking about how the power system is such that, you know, things like efficiency, proficiency, and the ubiquitous word that gets thrown around, excellence, are, you know, propped up for people to pay attention to, and teachers of de-skilled have become technicians and administrators, and they're under surveillance at all times. Then the kids are under surveillance, and the administrators who are surveying and watching the teachers are under surveillance. So performance management is one of the biggest parts of the education system. Why? Because lots of profits are at stake. Corporations run the show. Corporations dictate the terms for education and all the rest of it. Now, people feel powerless in that sense. And Foucault talks about power. And he has this theory of web of power. Right? We're all part of the web of power. We're entangled in the web of power. We have it. We don't know we have it lots of times. Certain situations, in some contexts, we can exercise our power. Right? In other contexts, our powers are dormant. They're muted. Why? And that's our business here, to discover why our power is dormant in this context, and yet in the other context, we can wield our power. And how do we build a bridge between the two so can power be shared? Right? To become completely free, and when we talk about education being about freedom, right? And that's something that I want you guys to tell us. We can enlighten one another about the meaning of freedom. In Foucault's conclusion about systems that have institutions, such as American society, is that whenever you have an institution, you cannot be completely free or even partially free, except in certain cases. Right? And so freedom will come as a result of removing oneself from an institution. But then when you remove yourself from an institution, what do you have left? Right? So it becomes paradoxical. Education towards freedom is a difficult challenge. It's like what Rousseau said in, Rousseau was 18th century, right? Yes. He said, "We are born free, but in chains everywhere." This is something that if we teach, I think, our little kids, right? You know, K through 6, 7, when they start developing analytical skills, and then allow them to do this and allow them to have a voice, and tell them that, you know, you are born free, but in chains everywhere, starting with your parents telling you, you know, do this and don't do that. I'm going to take you to Sunday school and you have no choice because I'm your parent, blah, blah, and all the rest of it. So power is it's like money, right? You got the money right now, you give it to the bank, and you buy a house, and the mortgage company has the money, they give it to somebody else. So money is going around, but you want some of that, right? You want your fair share, and they want their share. And lots of times it's not fair, but it's their share and so on. So power works the same way. So I want us to have that lens on power and think about our space in EDU7100 as a place where we have power, right? I mean, think about it. If I was an asshole and I demanded all this unreasonable work from you guys, say, I want a 50-page paper once a week, from everybody, and all this, and then I would be mean to you and not respond to your emails and so on. You could easily, collectively get together, right? Go to our dean, Michael Orfanti, and say, hey, this guy is making our lives miserable and we don't want him, right? And that's your collective power, right? And I would be removed from this position. Right? Power works like that. When it's collective, suddenly it takes on a different shape. This is why in the history of particularly in Western societies, unions have been instrumental in raising the standard of living for workers. Because we're all in one shape or another workers. Right? We don't play golf and talk about our stock portfolios. Maybe some of you do. I'm not privy to your lives, but that's an assumption I'm making. We work, right? We're all workers at different levels. Right? So there's a worker, and then there is the ones who are owners of society, as Noam Chomsky would call them. So what do we do? How do we grab power from owners of society? The best way to do it is to educate our kids, particularly public school setting, right? Because the overprivileged, they're isolated from the rest of us, and they get, like when people go to Ivy League schools, very difficult to get in, super easy to get out, right? It's not about learning about knowledge and, deep reading and understanding theories and becoming enlightened and all that. It's all about connections and socializing, about running the system, being the bosses. That's why so many idiots are in charge of companies, right? A lot of these CEOs that wield, right, degrees. Oh, I'm from Yale, I'm from Harvard. And, they're literally, many of them are stupid. And yet they have power. So how do we, shift power is the question. What time is it? Oh, I'm talking too much. So I'm going to pause right now. And what I want you guys to do, and I sent some messages to folks, on the forum, trying to, kind of like, jolt the system a bit and give you guys ideas about, bring your notes, talk about the kinds of things that you're passionate about. And the only thing I ask is that be mindful of the time you're taking up, right? And allow others to chime in, because there's 16 of us here, and everybody is super intelligent and passionate about the kinds of things that they want to talk about. And don't be afraid. This is a safe space, always will be. Don't be afraid to challenge one another. You say, hey, I disagree with what you're saying. I think you're missing this point or that point. But it's about the content, right? Because we're all members of this family, the EDU7100, and as a whole, the cohort family, and so on. If that sounds like music to your ears, let's get rolling.
Dr. Kashani or Tony, I had a question. When you were talking about Foucault, Foucault, is this what you're talking about? Okay.
That's him, yeah. Okay, somebody talk about the notion of freedom. Let's tackle that first. Can we get on the same page, all of us, about what we mean by freedom? What, Maxine Green talks about it. I mean, lots of things that she says. She wrote this book in 1988, and isn't it amazing? And maybe you disagree with me. Isn't it amazing that it's so relevant today? Right, 33 years later, it's like, I'm like, holy shit, man, she was predicting what we need to talk about today, because things are a lot worse than they were back then. And in some other ways, things are, the power systems that the masses have, because of the awareness, because of the level of consciousness we've arrived at, are bigger now. So we can shift power. So, okay. So let's talk about freedom.
Well, I was gonna say that because you said you brought up you fabulous point about green. She wrote this in '88, and I came to the same thing. Like this is happening now. And what struck me in this reading was this notion of what Americans think freedom is, like this negative freedom, she calls it, which is like so horrible to humanity. Like, you know, it's anti, you know, for the workers, anti for us as people who are supporting the system. And she calls it deregulation or laissez-faire, which has been happening. I remember Reagan in the 80s with trickle-down economics, you know, and now it's even worse what happened with the orange guy, you know, we threw out, you know. And it's reduced to a system. It's a system of just mechanical system that regulates humans to nothing more than, you said it, human resources. Like, and then the less that you think of them as humans, the more you can exploit them. And these are like, and these are my students, these are my family. Like you were saying, like in other countries with COVID, it's pretty bad. And it's like the educational system, and I'm gonna read this right here. It says, this guy named William Graham Sumner was a sociologist, an economist. He said basically that whole system where we can screw the masses is a natural form, like Darwinism. Like it's like, you know, that's just the way it is, and you got to accept it and, you know, live with it. And so what if you're part of it and you're a worker, you have no say so. And then the education system is for that. It says, it followed from this point of view that education could play no part in improving society, making it fair or more humane. It's like, what is this? Why am I teaching? You know, and I'm like, that's why I fight against that so much, because I see it in my students, how it ruins their lives, or their lives have already been, they're immigrants, you know, it's already hard enough what they're dealing with. Help us. Like the administrators, I'm like, they don't help me at all. So I'm like, okay, don't fuck with me. Just stay out of me. I understand you're not going to help me, but don't F with me, dude. But no, they come with us, all this testing and full on. And I remember in 2019, the school year started for the pandemic, and we went full. I mean, we were always going teachers to the test, and we had to take the Saturday. But the charter, it was a charter school. The CEO decided to go full on teaching to the test, like throw all the baby in the bathwater, all art, music, everything, just full on. And I was stood up, and I was in the faculty meeting, the first meeting of the semester. I stood in front of everybody, and I said, dude, this is wrong. We're doing such a wrong. And I started coming up with, like, I was like that guy, and I forgot that video you sent. He was saying, can you imagine with the Ritalin? And if you, I actually told them that this was, and I mentioned study after study, and I said, and they were all educators, and they all looked at me dumbfounded, all of them in the room, and nobody said anything. The administrator was horrified, except the only one. I said, my union president stood up, and I was like, oh yeah, she's gonna back me up. She said, it's a necessary evil, Andreas. And I said, what? This is the stuff that we're up against. Not only that, to me, I'm passionate because I see the destruction it does to my students, to my family. They're living in utter poverty, dude. Their lives, or some of them are just, they're going to prison, or they're getting deported, and it's just, I can't just sit around by and just watch it, and it's happening now. And it's like, we were fighting this crap fascism in the 20s, in the 30s, 40s, and overseas. It's here right now. And like you said, we are the ones, the torchbearers. So if we're not going to do it, who is? And I'm going to shut up right now because I've been going on. But I just want to say that I'm so happy that we have this circle of freedom, as what Green called it. We can express ourselves and actually start. We're going to be big time powerful people. And there's people like Ted Cruz, like, you know, Candace Owens, that just do the exact opposite of what they should do. And that's my biggest fear now, is like, how am I going to control this to not go that way, you know? But I always stay grounded with my kids, and I always go to the ghetto, and I always travel the world. Like, and I always go, and I don't go to the Club Meds. I go where the people are, and I eat what the people eat. And sometimes I live with them, and that keeps me grounded. But because they know where the good stuff is anyway too. But anyways, I'll shut up.
All right.
As you're speaking, Andreas, it made me think of my conversations with my friends I've had, and they actually mentioned it in the book here, but Hannah Arendt's The Human Condition. It made me think of that, and how people are just so willing to go along with things and not stand up. So when you're speaking about your administration and them knowing that what they're doing is not necessarily wrong. No, it's wrong sometimes. It's wrong and not for the best interest. And they kind of go along just to go along, and they're just kind of like robots. It made me think of that. And then it made me think of when I'm speaking with my friends and I get as angry as, well, I don't know if you were angry, but I get pretty upset when they're just like, oh, well, that's just how things are. Like, but it doesn't have to be that way. And it pisses me off when I read a book that's 30 years ago or beyond, and we're still having the same problems. Because in reality, things can change instantly. It's people who don't want to stand up and use their privilege. We all have it, and no one wants to use that for the benefit of humanity. And that's what pisses me off more than anything, when someone says, oh, well, you know, racism is just what it is, or it doesn't exist, and they delude themselves into some sort of fantasy world. And part of the problem is that people aren't willing to be honest, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for people to admit, you know, that they have these thoughts, but we're never going to get anywhere if we're not honest and really speaking about how to create change. And that change is so multi-layered, and it makes me angry when people just kind of accept it as it's just is what it is. I don't like it.
Are people deluding themselves, or are we being deluded or lied to, and have we become indoctrinated into this message, right? These languages, or not languages, but the words, believing in how they form, like fill us up. I don't even remember where I read this, because I read for work and read for this and read for everything, but and I might have even been watching it, but it was very interesting. The person that everyone says that racism is a result of ignorance, but that's actually not true, right? It's a result of the information you're receiving. And so, because you're not born with that information, it's given to you over and over and over again. So it gets back to the truth, right? The truth. And until, at least in America, we tell the truth, until we're allowed, there's that freedom again, until we tell the truth, then we're not free, because that's the route, right, to freedom. And so I think that the American lie permeates every single part of our systems and our education. So we are, as frustrated, like it pisses me off too. I mean, the people I'm mostly having to say, that's not true. That's the American lie, is my family, right? Because I expect that we should at least be able to tell the truth here in our, safe space, and we should be able to educate one another in the truth. But that frustration is met. I have to always consider the intersectionality of it, that people believe what we're told, right? And so this language and the messaging and the, oh, racism is ignorant, or it's, I don't see color, and, things like that. Though all of those messages keep us in bondage when we believe them and don't unpack them and dissect them. I mean, we have like complete cognitive dissonance in full array every day in our everyday lives.
Right.
And when you're saying that, I'm sorry, it made me think of when especially when the man that was previously in office, when he would talk about journalism and fake news, and the frustrating thing for me, coming from that community, the fact of the matter of what you just said, most people just take what they hear, they don't do their additional research, and they want to say the news is fake, when not that the news doesn't have their own biases and that they don't have, corporations and things behind them, but for you to just take what anyone says at face value, not do your own research, that's the problem. The American public is so lazy when it comes to that. And the fact that the average American, most newspapers are written at a 6th grade reading level because people simply do not read and are not interested in finding any more information out beyond what is given to them. And that's the problem. Americans don't understand their civic duty and knowing that they need to know and understand all the systems that are in play here, but it is easier for people to, that's why I said delude themselves. Yes, it is a conditioning that we're given, but they don't want to do the work. And we've all been conditioned. And when I think about myself, because I was one of those people who, when I would go to a foreign country, I would go to the Americanized version of it, not understanding I'm just not only adding to that system of capitalism, but I'm not helping and allowing myself to be open to that country and to those people and seeing how they really live. And it's just, we've all been conditioned, you're right, but it's up to us to all also do the work to unlearn and relearn a lot of things. And a lot of us don't want to do that.
Okay, let me just quickly jump in. I know folks have a lot to say here, but this portion of the dialogue just reminded me of the book that I'm currently reading about consciousness. I mean, recently I've been deeply involved with consciousness studies for the book that I'm writing and all the rest of it. But that's a topic for another conversation. But here, Christoph Koch, who is not related to the Koch brothers, by the way, a scientist, he says something that Andrea and Malia were actually pointing out and articulating eloquently. I want to just read this 2 little portions that kind of speaks to the challenge that we have. How do we do this? We know that this is the case, right? An inexhaustible multiplicity of factors influences your day-to-day encounters with people. Their age, gender, ethnicity, dress, bearing, and emotional expression will imprint themselves on your mind and will guide the way you approach, talk to, and judge them. And all of this escapes conscious scrutiny. And he goes on to say, you can't escape being a child of your culture and upbringing, soaking up implicit judgments from fairy tales and myths, from contemporaries, no, from books, movies, and games, from your parents, playmates, teachers, and contemporaries. If you don't believe me, just take an implicit association test. And he recommends the one that Harvard has put out. You can find it online, the implicit association test. I recommend that you guys on your free time give this a try. Do the implicit association test. Let me type it in the chat. Now, so there lies the challenge as teachers and leaders of education. How do we undo the powerful complex of mythology and the books that are out there and the lies that teachers tell their students and the lies that the leaders of society tell their constituents and the lies that we're born into? It's a monumental task, but we have the tools to fight, right? To use and fight through this serious barrier. It's like, what's the metaphor I'm looking for? Well, let's just say it's a mountain in front of you, and you want to turn this mountain into a soft, level road, so we can have a level playing field. How do you go up against the juggernaut is, I think, what you guys are talking about. So let me stop and allow you to continue the discourse.
One of the things that I wonder is though, what happens when folks are living under these systems and being oppressed, and then they have an opportunity to have a piece of the American pie. And I think that goes back to Andreas saying, you know, we're going to get these degrees, we're fighting the good fight, but what happens once we do get those platforms and those things? And I did my son has dyslexia, and when he was in 7th grade, I had to assist him with the reading of an assignment that he did around the Bacon Rebellion, where poor whites, indigenous peoples, and enslaved peoples banded together to rise up and burn down Jamestown. And after that, you know, the power structures began doing things to separate indigenous peoples and enslaved peoples and poor white folks to not teach anymore. So paying indigenous peoples to track down runaway enslaved people, give white folks property, and do things like this. And it just seemed like a basic, you know, middle school assignment, you know, and I regret that I'm starting that story at the assignment, because a whole lot happened before that. But I think we're still operating on those basic premises. And, you know, like Molly was saying, where we have to recognize that we're lying, but I think part of what we're lying to ourselves about is this is just basic bias. It was constructed this way on purpose. And even people who are being oppressed by these systems don't know that. And the folks who are kind of in the middle, seeing that it's wrong, but don't really feel like they have power to affect that change. You know, I just wonder, you know, what does freedom actually look like then? What is it? And I'm really glad that Green is inviting us to think about it and we're talking about it, but where do you start, I guess, that's my question. Is you can pick a point. And, you know, I love taking the implicit, what did you call it? Assessment, I think, association test. And I think it's revealing. Mine revealed that I don't trust white people at all, any of them, really. And that's disconcerting because my family is white. So anyway, well, my family of origin, I should say, not current family. Anyway, I'm doing a lot of talking. I'm going to stop, but I think what we're ourselves about really has to do with capitalism wanting to perpetuate ourselves. And I remember, you know, they saying religion is the opioid of the masses, but I really think it's capitalism. But.
And I'll pop in and Karen, I can't answer your big questions at the end, but I wanted to revisit your comment about like people not thinking they have the power or they need more power and they don't know how to get it, right? And I think as teachers in the classroom, oh my God, the cicadas are furiously everywhere. Sorry about that, everybody, crazy. That starting in our classrooms by giving them the knowledge that gives them essentially the power. And I talked a little bit about Goldi Muhammad in my comments and how she has created her framework of like implementing an intellect piece into all of our content, K through 12, of teaching our students where that unjust, what's the noun for unjust? Why am I having a rain fart here? I'm trying to multitask and watch the lacrosse game. Where the unjust powers are, and then they can have that knowledge to start dismantling those whatever they're, you know, whatever is out there, whatever system is out there that they're going to fight against. Am I making myself clear?
I think I understood what you're saying. I think Molly was raising her hand, so I'm going to defer to her.
She says no.
It's Mally like Sally, but no, sorry, I didn't mean to if I was raising my hand. Sorry.
It's
Your
Mally,
screen
yes.
frozen, so I couldn't tell whether you were raising your hand or just gesturing that got frozen. Sorry.
Sally, not Molly, right?
Right.
Correct.
Mally like Sally.
Mally like Sally, or you could say Malakia.
Like Tony, like Pony.
Oh, Mally like Sally. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Mally.
It's okay. It happens.
I'm sure it happens all the time.
I was thinking about all of the things that everyone has been saying and through the reading and thinking about how in order to have real freedom, there's a lot. It's like multitudinous, right? But I think that there needs to be safety and the ability for people to speak truth to power.
Mhm.
And that needs to coincide with the dismantling of the cultural idea that we have where we're all disconnected, right? We need to be able to see each other's humanity and to see each other as another version of who we are.
Mhm.
And the othering that happens almost immediately when you're born really just keeps us from seeing that. And I think that unless those things can happen, the disconnect is huge, right? And so when I think about the students that I have who are 6, 7, and 8 years old, I can do all that I can to support them to understand that we're all connected to each other. But I'm also thinking about, their children and their children's children, and I know that I won't see necessarily the ways that I've helped or supported them to understand that, and I think that decolonizing and indigenizing how we speak and how we teach and how we learn and how we think are really the like two central parts of thinking about power and about how we can navigate it and how we can let go of it and give it up, right? And that, I think that that's a piece of it too, to normalize giving up power and giving it to someone else and stepping away. And so I just think it's huge to think about freedom and what it all includes. And it's it's like really daunting, and it makes me feel the way that I feel when I'm thinking about my students or my class, where I'm like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then you just take a breath and move forward. So that's really what I'm thinking about is the idea that like folks need to be safe, to feel safe. And so there is like so much power in mass, but if you're not safe, then you're not free. And so you can't continue to keep that power, I guess.
Sarah?
Okay, sorry. I was like lowering my hand and unmuting at the same time. So I know I said this to and Andreas's post, but I've been reading The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. And it just reminded me of what you said, Heather, because basically one of her premises is that a lot of the like social issues have become like the zero sum thing where like if you like give power, like the idea that you're giving even power up, that like it's not that like the whole concept, like for example, Medicaid expansion or voting rights, like they help everybody. But the narrative has become like really damaging where it's become like, well, you're going to give up your power. You're going to give up your money instead of like everybody wins. When one group wins, everybody wins. Just like in a pandemic, like if India is doing well, we're all doing well, right? Tuberculosis anywhere is tuberculosis everywhere. COVID anywhere is COVID everywhere. And if the US has all the vaccines, that doesn't help the rest of the countries that also need the vaccines, because people like to come back to like to go visit their family in India and be able to come back. And so like, everybody is in it together, and it's really interesting. And I think like to your point, it is like it feels overwhelming when you try to teach all this like stuff, but you don't know like what your colleagues are doing to support that, whether it's before or after. And then, I've always said like, it's also about what American culture is doing. Because if American culture is like undoing like all that I'm trying to do, like it's like Sisyphus in the rock. And I just feel like I'm pushing it up, and I may push a couple people over, but I need like, it needs to be collective, right? It needs to be the elementary, start at middle school, it has to be a through line, and then American culture has to chime in and support it, because if you don't have them to kind of help educate as well to some degree, it can be really difficult to undo their implicit biases and then hope that, you know, that sticks if you are successful. And I think that, you know, some of my students, you know, always seem to like kind of click better if it's been reinforced through their experiences outside of school, for better or for worse. That's not always a good thing. So I was just thinking about that. And if anybody hasn't read that book, I highly recommend it. It is pretty intense, but it's also really powerful.
The Sum of Us, is that what you said?
Yeah, The Sum of Us by Heather McGhee. It just came out 2021, and really, really well written book.
Could you type the title in the
Yeah.
chat box, please? Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah. So a couple of things. The notion of giving up power. What does that look like in the classroom? You're muted.
Oh,
Andreas.
Andreas, go.
Andreas, you're muted.
Sorry.
Oh.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Oh.
I'm just gonna add to what Heather and Sarah were saying. Heather was saying you need in the classroom, or she was talking about you need a safe space, and Sarah was saying you need a community. You need like American society. So you like the whole reading. What Green's trying to say is like we need to create this space where people can have the freedom to think for themselves, and then open spaces, you know, for perspectives, and then take action, praxis, right? So what Heather was saying is important. You can't have people think clearly and act upon their, you know, passions or whatever until they're like, their problems are, you know, this, I got kids that come with like hunger, with like their mom and dad just beat the shit out of each other. That, you know, their brother was gangbanging, he's in prison, you know, like all these things. And it's like, how, and they want them, oh, write the FLT, the focused learning target, so you know what's on the test. They don't care, understand that. So what the only way I found was I come from their neighborhoods, I look like them. So it's like, you create a safe space for them and you say, I understand you, and you let them, like you said, how do you do that? How do you give up power? You're just like, I am supposed to be your teacher, and I'm supposed to tell you what to do. No, I tell them, this is your classroom. This is, you're in charge. I want to know what you want to learn. And since I know where they come from, speak a lot of, you know, their language, a lot of them, Spanglish or straight from Guatemala, or coño, épale, I can speak Mexican, orale, güey, vato, I can speak, you know, they understand that they can talk to me, and I kneel with them. I say, I want this to be your classroom. And I remember reading that thing about, what was the first reading in the week where they give them a wall. I give them the whole classroom. I go, this is your classroom. You want to, whatever you draw or tag or whatever poem you put up, I want to put it up, dude. Screw what the principal says. I'm going to put up what you want, because I want to show you. But then you actually got to show them that you care. It's not just, you know, it's got to be genuine. You go eat lunch with them. You go to the playground and create the playground, bring it in the classroom and you play with them. You go to their house in the community. You talk to their parents. And then you start opening up these spaces, because then you start realizing, okay, this stuff, school ain't really helping me, and it's this bureaucratic machine. So what can I do with the community? And then you start talking to the parents, and I started talking with other teachers, and we decided like these, and we spent after school with them talking, and to the point where like these kids wanted to not go home because of the issues they were having. They wanted to hang out with us because they felt safe, and we were actually talking about their future and helping them with their homework, and also playing basketball and just getting to know them as people. And that's all they wanted. They wanted a connection. Some of them just wanted food. So I realized that, dude, they needed something else more than what the school was offering. So we just started running around the neighborhood. I said, let's go play basketball and then run around. And then I remember this guy from the Olympian, Gideon Massey, came from some LA 84 program, and we got to know him. And the kids like, oh God, Olympian, he's, you know, and we just started riding bikes with the kids, and we created this bike club. And the kids started, and the community came. We started just learning so much about we took them to neighborhood council. We took them to the museums. We took them to watch plays from Native American, from authors. What's his name? This guy read he was a Mexican American author. He wrote a book about gangbanging, about their lives. And we started, and then I'm a math teacher, man, and science teacher. And we started talking about these things in math class, right? You have to, like I'm supposed to be teaching them whatever skills to pass the test. And I would teach them math. I said, you got to understand this stuff. And I try my best. But at the same time, sometimes they were dead. You got to make it alive. So you got to open up spaces. You got to think outside the box and think about praxis, because to the kids in the classroom, the classroom doesn't mean nothing if it doesn't relate to them in any shape, way, or form, culturally or any way. But once you do relate it to them, and you show them that they're valuable people who are citizens, that are respected, that have power, and you show them, because these kids are like supposed to be the future gang members, the future people in prison, the future homeless people, the ones taking smack or selling it, you know? That's how they're looked upon. They're like, why am I even going to school? That's what I'm supposed to be, you know? But now when you put them, you know, we give them a shirt, man, we drove around the neighborhood, we had like 80 people, and we took over like the community. People recognized us. They invited us to the parades. We knew all the council members. They were recognized, and they felt so, I mean, they felt like the traumas, they can start like learning, you know, learning about learning, because let's be truthful, we got brainwashed, all of us, especially in the United States, at least for me in East LA, what education is, the lies. You know, 1492, Sail Up Scoops, the Columbus sailed sky blue, when he didn't talk about how he screwed my people over, and then we started the international slave trade, and they have a country in Colombia after him in our capital. Are you serious? Are you serious? But they rob our histories, and the kids, when they start finding out, they want to know, man, because they know what they live. They just don't have the tools to express themselves, because they feel like, we were reading, they're stuck with the determinism. They just think that's the way it is. No, but they start believing that it's not the way it is, because they see me and they see me doing stuff. And if I can do it, I tell them, if I can do it, you can do it. Why not? I'm from the same neighborhood. I look like you, dude. What's the problem? And then we start talking about what the problem is. And we start questioning. But then I got administrators saying, you need to be not talking about that and talking about, you know, whatever test scores or whatever. And it's like, you don't even know. Don't mess with me. These are good stuff. But anyways, it's praxis. You have to take it out of the classroom. You have to do different things. You got to try to do different. I had to reach them, you know. And it's like the COVID came and everything was things. I mean, things changed a lot. Things changed a lot. Like now, I don't think this is even education. Like I'm really. Imagine if you were my admin. Like it's been rough, really rough, because I can't just take this line down and I give it to them and I tell them how, you know, let's help them. Don't make it worse. Like how bad, but they don't care. Dude. And the kids don't come. The kids just don't come. Everybody knows who's teaching. It's a disaster. I mean, I know who was saying that. I'm sorry. I'll stop. But this reading takes a lot of. It's fascinating to me, and I'm not angry at any. I'm passionate. I don't mean to like yell at anybody, but it's like, and I really thank you all for being who you are and being in this space, because this is powerful stuff. So.
Are you talking about Victor Rios, the author of Punished?
No, his name is Always Running. Is his name, his title of his book.
Target. Okay, no.
But I know who Victor is. Always Running. Yes, they made a play about it. We took him to watch the play in the playhouse across the street from the Hollenbeck Police Department.
I wanted to answer the question when you said, how do you give up power in your classroom? I'm not teaching elementary and middle or high school. I'm not teaching primary right now. I'm teaching in law school, but I have taught in other levels. And how I've structured almost everything is you're going to have content that has to be delivered, right? But I ask them, how do you want to do this? What do you need? What do you want to know? How do you feel when material is presented this way? How do you respond to material this way? And that releases, they're empowered to express what they need and what they want and what they like. And it releases the power over deciding for them how they receive the information.
I really like that. I think that it kind of goes back to the point about safety. And I think that I don't know, my own theory about a lot of the issues that we struggle with. It comes down to being afraid, to fear. And so if we can create classrooms where students truly feel safe to talk about what they need, I don't know, I feel like that's a huge step towards freedom, because I think that we all are afraid to talk about what we're afraid of, and what we and even to tell people what we need. And like for me, I think the idea of just feeling safe enough to have like even conversations like this, I mean, that I feel like that's how, like, that's moving the needle forward, right? Like being able to have these discussions, and especially as a student, like it just feels it's like I love Mally. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I know you okay. So I love how you that emphasis on like what is it that the students need? How do they want to, explore this content? I think that is on so many different levels, and in terms of like addressing different issues that might come up in the classroom. I just feel like that is such a powerful approach. And so I think that it's kind of inspiring to just hear everyone like talk about how they are approaching their classrooms and how they work with their students. Makes me wish that I had the same experience when, I mean, this program has just been amazing, and it's been really enlightening. It's like, wow, this is how education should be. And to hear all of you talk about what you're doing in your classrooms, it's just been really inspiring. So thank you all.
For me, when I appreciate what each of you guys have said, and while I'm not a teacher and not in the classroom, I always look at things on the macro level, and that's what my focus is on how all of these things are affected, the small things, in terms of education and access to it. And so I always look at it from a systems point of view and a perspective and the historical background of it. And some things that made me think about what each of you kind of have said in various points. In terms of power, the problem is the people who are in power don't want to give up the power. And they're trying to hold on to it, and they're holding on to it by controlling people within these systems. So to everyone's point who have mentioned before, no, a teacher can't do this because they have these expectations by the district, which is by the government, which is run by the money, you follow the trail up to, and it's America, it's money. It's at the end of the day, it's money, and they need the working class to do it. And the middle class manages the working class. They have you afraid to be poor. They have you, it's all just about the systems. And the idea of when I think of the marijuana industry now, I don't smoke it. If people want to do it, I don't care. I don't mind. Black and brown guys have been put in jail for that. And now you have it where you make it legal, and then you still keep them out of it because you don't want them to have money. Yet when it comes to the drugs and the crack, the US government put it in South Central. So that it's all about all of those things, and my point is how you impact a child. While yes, inspiring a child in the classroom is important and encouraging them and all of that, it also has to be where you're thinking about the family and the background. Because if a child, like Andreas's point, they're inspired in the classroom, a teacher is giving them and encouraging them, and then they go home back into the same system, sometimes that can be discouraging. And how do you keep a child to keep that passion that was ignited in them by a teacher or by a person, and have to go back into an environment where it's not looked upon to be educated, and you have all these other things. So when you guys speak, I always speak from that level, because that's how I always see things, is the bigger picture of it. And so it was another point, but I forgot. So I'll be quiet.
And that actually reminds me of like how everything is intersectional, right? Like everything is so intertwined with one another. All of our problems are mixed together in really deeply entrenched ways. You know, you talk about systemic problems with, you know, racism and patriarchal ideas, all that stuff. And so what we need to realize is that we can't fix one problem without addressing the others as well. And that takes a collective, you know, framework of all of us saying, we demand better, we want better, this is how we're gonna do it. And, you know, these people are gonna focus on this problem. At the same time, these people are gonna focus on this problem. And we're gonna, you know, push forward together to move the system in a way and make it work for as many people as humanly possible. And I think a lot of times we try to kind of specialize a little too much and focus like, oh, we have to dismantle capitalism. Yes, we do, but we can't address capitalism without also addressing white supremacy and also addressing, you know, all of these other things. And that takes a lot of people. It takes a lot of brains to work together and make that happen.
Mhm.
I was thinking, I read a book years ago called, I think, How Children Succeed. And the basic premise was like, if we want all children to succeed with happy, healthy, safe lives, that really it's about helping young mothers attach to their children, to build attachment with children, because there's generation upon generation of trauma that attachment can't happen, which just perpetuates the trauma. And I think a lot, I'm here, I've shared on all the forums of that is indicative of how we treat the earth, like that our relationship with the earth is mirrored in our relationship with each other, and capitalism and patriarchy and white supremacy, that it all comes back to like, here we are educating, teaching, raising children on stolen land, built on stolen labor. It's so a thought is, how do we reconnect all the way back to the foundation of like the place we are right here, right now.
Mhm. I want to jump in very quickly. Now that we're talking about power, now we're talking about how to confront a system that has so much power seemingly over us, and we're aware of it, and the extent to which we can push back and then penetrate through that system of power. Sometimes it's like an abyss, right? You stare into it, it'll stare right back at you. But if you're able to come out of it, you know, it's like what Nietzsche had said, what does not destroy you will make you stronger. Let's assume we all subscribe to that notion. That what will not destroy us will definitely make us stronger. We have two things here that I want us to open up. One is the differences between education and schooling. Sometimes people, the average person, shall we say, assumes that when we discuss this education, we're discussing schooling. Right? But we know that there is a difference. Then it comes to the point, the second thing, where we recognize that there are overlaps between education and schooling. After all, schooling is about providing education and then systematically developing that education to a point where we issue degrees and advancements and new opportunities and privileges and so on. So our schools, institutions of information management, where information has already been produced for a couple of 100 years, and they just, you know, they enhance it, they change it a little bit, and they change its shape, they change its color, put some makeup on it, sugar coated, you know, like, you know, there's lots of talk about diversity and equity and all that, anti-racism, et cetera, et cetera. Let's have commercials where, you know, Black people and Asians are featured and so forth. Let's sell products to everybody. Let's pretend that we have arrived. at the post-racial age. We have arrived at an egalitarian paradigm in America and all the rest of it. Corporations are very good at that, right? There is a multi-billion-dollar industry known as advertising industry, coupled with another multi-billion-dollar business known as public relations that work hand in glove, and then they go under the umbrella of marketing to sell us these ideas. And then all those ideas are, of course, part and parcel to schooling too. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the differences, the similarities, and how do we go beyond information management and actually go after education. All right. 21st century, we have access to lots and lots of information, but how much access do we have to knowledge? What say you?
Well, I mentioned in the prompts that when I do this reading, I'm like, why? And you even mentioned in the beginning, we should be teaching this to kindergartners to 6th grade. Like, why aren't we doing that? You know, and it comes to, it's just like, and I was talking to Dana, she's the head librarian, and she is like the gatekeeper to this information. And she feels so bad that only so much of a population has access to it, and it's just wrong. And you got to pay money. Like if we don't pay for the Antioch, we don't get, you know, you try to go to Google or online and pay for a journal, man. They're like $70 a pop, man. Who can afford to do that? And you're like, okay, well, why does Jeff Bezos have access to that? You know, it's like, it's pretty obvious to me, but now I know it. The people don't know. The people don't know. And it's like, so it's like, they're clueless, you know, they're just, so, and the powers that be don't want you to let you know, because they don't want can you imagine if my kids got that information, the odds of them becoming president would multiply by 20, 30 folds. And you don't want a kid from whose parents came from El Salvador or whatever to become president of the United States, or she becomes the first female president of the United States to actually do, you know, we've never really had, besides a white guy in power. I'm sorry, Obama was half black, but what he did with my people, the deporter in chief, we never had, we need somebody, the people, we need a real person who knows the streets and knows the people and is compassionate, who has the, I guess, I don't want to say the balls, but the
Well, you said it.
Yeah, I said it, man. The chutzpah, dude, to do what's right. And Trump had it, but he did it for laissez-faire, for deregulation, man. That's what we need, somebody like him. But like somebody, like some guy, some female Latina who, like AOC, man. Can you imagine what she would do as president? Can you imagine? We're forcing Trump, Biden to do things that are unprecedented. Like that stimulus thing, like people are like, oh yeah, the government's actually giving us money. That's like, you know what? That's what the foundation of government should have been. That's why it's there for, to help us. And Republicans are like, oh, that's bad. It's going to stimulate, it's going to take away jobs. It's like, what are you talking about? So it's like, we need, you know, things need to like, I just lost my train of thought, but it's like, it's just things I think kids, I'm sorry, I'll shut up.
Andreas, quick question.
Yeah.
You drink a lot of coffee?
I don't drink any coffee.
Oh, okay. Well, thank
You don't
God.
want to see me on coffee. When I go to Peru, I chew a lot of coca, and that's like yerba mate times 10.
Yeah.
But you don't want to see me. I wake up, I'm like this all the time, regular.
Yeah, okay. I gathered that, yeah.
But
cool.
that allows me to, kids love my class because I make it alive. Like this energy, and I pass it to them. It's synergy. And I believe that's what we need. We need more humanistic synergy to start like a wave. Like Dr. Stadium, I'm that crazy guy that starts just screaming and start a wave, and then I make it happen. And it's like, people look at me at the end, they don't look at me so crazy no more. But at the beginning, it was but the point is, you got to motivate people. People are like not feeling it for obvious reasons, but it's like, I don't know, I'm good at shaking up people. I'm good at that. And that's why I went into education, because how are we going to get, you got to get these youth to start critically thinking. And I've been in education for 25, 30 years now, something like that. And since the early 90s. And I have thousands of students and I've impacted a whole bunch, and I know that they're going to do good stuff. So, and I have this belief in it because, you know, we in my classroom, I cry with them. They cry. We get to the highest joys. We go through the lowest lows of their lives, but it's like we start growing. We start like growing as people. Like they teach me, and it's like such an amazing journey. And they start believing, they start knowing that they are agents of change. Like they start, you know, it's hard to do to these kids, but you just spend time with them, man, and you start seeing, you know, through their suffering. Like I remember, like I said, I've been in education a long time, and now I have kids that are grown. They're grown men, grown women. And a lot of the time they're doing good stuff. And I live in the same neighborhood that I actually started teaching in my own elementary school. So when I go to the store, walk around, they know me, and I see them sometimes. And I ran to this kid. He was in my running club. I started 25 years ago in elementary school. He was gangbanging, man. He was full on gangbanging. I see him around him. This time I would see him in his work clothes. He's a painter. He does manual labor because he didn't graduate. He was gangbanging, drunk, high as hell. And he looked at me, he goes, "Hey, Crump, what's up, Mr. Crumple? You want to gangbang?" And he looked at me and I saw his eyes, and he was in pain. I could tell he was embarrassed because I told him, I told him when he was a kid, and he was in my class. I was a TA then when I first started my own elementary school. I told him, "Man, I believe in you." He was smart. I said, "You're so smart. I see what you could do." And he got into running club and he started getting good grades. But, you know, you can't, how do you sustain something when you have, like, the kids come for a year and they got to leave. You know, right when you get them to take notes, they leave, you know? But this kid, you know, he left my class and then he had issues at home, and like, he just went the wrong way. And he saw me and I looked at him, I said, "Mijo, you're still young. You still have a chance. Go to school. You're smart." I go, I'm not judging you, Mijo, about gangbanging, but do you really want the cops up your ass, dude? Really? Is that that's what's going to happen, man? You know how it is. I know how it is. And he looked at me and he started crying. He goes, "I love you, Crumps. I love you, Crumple," because he knows I believe in him. And it's hard, dude. It's hard to see this on an everyday level, man. Like, these are kids. These are real day kids, man. They could turn into your worst nightmare, but they just want love. And we're not giving it to them because we're following this stupid system of robots and people just acquiescing to materialism. We're consumers, but the power lies there. We are the consumers. We're the workers. If we get together, they can't stop us. They may shoot the front of the head. And that's what Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were talking about, a piece of the pie. Like, that's where that's where it hurts them, dude. When you tell Coca-Cola, "We're gonna buy your shit because you're backing up these Georgia politicians, they're passing laws to take away our voting rights, we're not gonna buy Coke." And Coke just said what? They went against what instead in Georgia. Even Major League Baseball went against. They said, we're gonna move the All-Star from Atlanta to somewhere else because what they did, they passed that law in Georgia. And that's because of what people are coming on the streets and Black Lives Matters and all that, et cetera, et cetera. So things are happening, but we have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing, put our feet on the pedal, because I risk myself because I like that kid, like, looks at me, my family in Peru, dude, you know how much money we send them in remittances every month? Thousands of dollars every month, because we're privileged enough to do it. And that's how people sometimes live. I don't think you guys understand how the real world lives. The real third world, the dystopian they're talking about in the readings, it's been happening already in the rest of the world. It's tough, man. I've been homeless in America, in the United States. I don't like to call it America because it's South America included, and they have more. But anyway, to be homeless in the US is hard, dude. I cannot fathom doing that in Mexico or in Peru. It's ridiculous what they have to afford. And then they come here for a better life, and how do we treat them? We spit on them. Literally. And they're kids, man. I'm sorry. It's just everything, it comes out, and it's like, it's not
Okay.
I do what I can.
All right.
But Andreas, I'm seeing this, you know, in higher ed, and not students who've come from the places your students come from. They come from many different places, and some of them, by the standards you're describing, would be from privileged places, and they're not free either. And I'm not trying to get with the oppression Olympics here, but I am saying that these things are affecting even people who are benefiting on the system. Their souls, their passions, their urges are really, it's eating away at people. And I don't, that's one of the things I try to help my students do, is find their own voice within this at wherever point they're entering this conversation. Some of them are entering them as students of color who come from privilege. Some of them are coming out of the military and feel like they don't have a place. Some people are coming from poverty or whatever, but I think a lot of people are feeling this. They're feeling it. They don't necessarily know how to address it. I'm not, that's an add-on to what you're saying. It's not a counterpoint to what you're saying at all.
No, I agree with you. And a lot of those people, what they're feeling, they actually they're feeding that into Trumpism, because they're that hopelessness. And it's like, we have to fill that void with something else. But that's, I believe it's education. I believe it's compassion. I believe it's just, I went to Chico State, and I had to live, it's a white cow town. Like, the only people of color are the ones working in the fields, and that's it. And then the only kind of, the only other, the university is the salvation for, for anything else that's not a cow town. When I was forced to live with a redneck, he was doing meth. He was just a piece of shit guy, but he ended up being my best friend, because we lived together for 4 or 5 years in the slums of Chico while I was living there. And if I can get to a consensus with him, and he was homophobic and everything, by talking to him, by actually caring about him and his family, because his brother died. He lived with us. His brother died, and he only came to me because nobody else in his family would help him, because nobody in his family cared about him. There's too many people in America. Nobody cares, even your family, and everybody's feeling that way. But if
let me jump in. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off and minimize the importance of this dialogue, but I think I want to give others to chime. Amy, did you want to, it seemed like you wanted to chime in.
Yeah, it keeps coming up. I think it's really hard to talk about consciousness, information, education, equity without talking about social media and the impact it's having on our consciousness and the impact it's having on our politics. And that just keeps coming up for me, especially reading Maxine Green's book, where she kind of laid the foundation for what the internet and social media has expounded upon, as far as making us feel like we have freedom, but actually we're losing it more and more.
Amy, did you also want to talk a little bit about Steiner's theories?
No, it's just the lens I'm used to. So when I'm reading these other theories, that's the lens I'm looking through. Not particularly.
Okay.
Unless you wanted me to.
Well, I was wondering, I think we could benefit from kind of like seeing the similarities and differences. Maybe, just to say a few words, the different lenses that you're looking at, and if you want to. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I necessarily know where to start. Something that's coming up for me is just wanting to, like, my studies from undergrad through now, I have really focused on the Steiner view of child development, done a lot of work with sensory integration and these kinds of the foundations of lifelong health and early childhood, and what that could do, the impact that early childhood has culturally for each of us. And like what you said at the beginning, like the only way to truly be free is to remove yourselves from institutions. I'm kind of living that dream, which makes me want to take a back seat in a lot of this and still be engaged, because it is a huge privilege. It's a huge privilege that when I was, a teenage mom, I found this education for my kids when I was not going to let them be part of the system. And that I've made huge sacrifices, as you mentioned, like to not get paid for my work, essentially, and be have to get a second job so I can afford the luxury of teaching at a Waldorf school. And then I'm in a situation where I can be self-employed. So there's like, I'm outside of all systems, which has me thinking pretty freely and sometimes wacky, but really looking in the pandemic of like, what is actually, like, what do our children actually need to learn at this point in time in this place? And when looking at all the systems that have been created through white supremacist patriarchal capitalism, like it's so much that I do feel like there is value in all the lenses that I honor those who are in the system fighting the good fight. And am also trying to go like, from where I am, my vantage point, my privilege of being outside and free in my thinking, supported by my community, what's important? What is important, and what is the foundation of what the hell has happened here? This grand, I would consider failed experiment of the United States of America.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's a challenge, right? The challenge is it possible to work within the system to change the system? Or do you need to exit the system and work from the outside to create new systems to compete with the main juggernaut, and then eventually get to a point, kind of like, and this is analogous to like credit unions fighting the banking system. Credit unions are great institutions, but the banking industry is much more powerful. There are 90% more banks than there are credit unions in this country. And they're both legal and can be put together and so on. So what makes the banking industry more powerful than credit unions? So what makes the mainstream education system more powerful than things like Waldorf and Montessori and other private institutions, or even charter schools that allow this sort of opening up of the educational sphere and empower teachers to use their passion, like many of you, Andreas, Karen, everybody, right, in this class, have about giving education for freedom towards the kids. So in the future, if they're not kids, like in Mally's case, she's working with law students. Or in my case, I'm working with doctoral students, but we're co-learners, so we're colleagues. It's a different level. Nonetheless, we're in positions where we have an ability and then the opportunity to create new ways of seeing the world. So this is the challenge. And so this is what's going to keep us up at night, right? Walking around thinking, well, how do I do this? How do I do this? Emily wants to chime in.
I was just thinking, like, to your question of like, how can we change things? Like, do we need to change things from within these institutions? And I feel like necessarily we have to from the within, but we also have to from without. So like we have to kind of, for lack of a better metaphor, like attack at multiple points, right? Like find the different, because I feel like on one hand, there are people like suffering, like, listening to Andreas talk about, the realities of his students. I think there are children suffering right now every day. And so we absolutely need to be working to change the systems from within as much as we can to hopefully at least a little bit improve the quality of life of the students now. But we also need to be looking at how we got here. And I personally think in order to truly see the change that we all deserve, it needs to be like a cultural change. Like, it can't just be like remodeling an institution. It needs to be breaking it down and starting over, and addressing who we are as occupants of this earth, you know, like who we are as, like, what are our values, you know, addressing all of the trauma that we are all walking around with, and, you know, and I don't know, I just feel like there's so much complexity to it, and so it's so deep, you know, deeply rooted. I mean, obviously within the systems themselves, within the institutions, but it's within us as humans, you know, who are separate from those institutions. And so we have to kind of, I think we all, like, one thing that I was thinking about this week, because, you know, in like the discussion forums, I feel like I'm always bringing up my area, which is like working with non-human animals in the natural world. And, you know, and I sometimes feel kind of guilty because, like, you know, there are so many people in this program who are doing amazing things to help other humans, and we have a hard enough time getting humans to care about other humans, and then I come in and I'm like, but what about the animals? And so but I think, like, the way that we actually do create change is we all have that thing that we're passionate about, and that thing that can, I think, make a difference. Like, if we all are trying to teach compassion, for example, in different ways to different populations, and trying to change the systems in our own ways, that we can just all kind of keep progressing. And, you know, in a way, I guess it's a good thing that we kind of all have our different areas of specialty and like what we're passionate about, because I think the sum of that then eventually gets to that systemic cultural change, if we're all kind of like within our niche, you know, like making change, if that makes any sense.
I think it makes sense. I think, Emily, it was you who brought up in previous discussion the myth of Sisyphus. Yes.
What was that? Can
you mentioned Sisyphus? Somebody was. Oh, it was Sarah.
Oh yeah, I was like, I don't know what that is.
What you're talking about is the interpretation of the myth by Albert Camus. You guys know who Albert Camus was? The French Algerian existentialist writer. Brilliant, you know, short novels, The Fall, anyways, The Plague, which relates to the pandemic conditions. So I recommend reading The Plague today. Anyways, what you're saying is, and this is what, you know, lots of people see that myth where Sisyphus is punished by the gods to push this boulder up the hill, and every day he gets up, he has to push the boulder up the hill, and just rolls right back down as soon as he gets up there. And then he has to do it again and again every day. That's his punishment. So Camus says, let's look at this process of pushing the boulder up as our lives. All right. You're pushing it. You embrace the process. It's not so much the goal of bringing the boulder up to the top of the hill. There is no goal here. It's the process of living. Once you embrace the process, you are making a difference. Yes, you don't change the world as you're doing this. You may, you know, be in your 90s thinking, oh, did I change the world? But you affected lives. You were an agent of change for people go through transformation and so on. And that was you, the Sisyphus, pushing the boulder up. All right. So if you look at it that way, I think a lot of the anxiety around it, the guilt, and the pain of helplessness goes away. All right. You're still in it. You're doing the work, but you're embracing the process. And then at some point, it's like what Kierkegaard says about the leap of faith. You have to take a leap of faith and trust the process. You will see along the way, like, you know, Andreas' example of one of his students becoming a gangbanger and all that. Along the way, people go the ways that you don't want them to go. You're not going to win every battle. You're not going to make everybody an engaged, critical thinking citizen who's your student or a colleague or whomever you work with and so on. You're not going to save all species. You're not going to solve the climate crises, but you are an agent involved. You are Sisyphus pushing the boulder up, knowing that tomorrow it'll be right back down, and then you're pushing it again. So this is what we're doing here in many ways. We look at theories, we intellectualize, we give citations to our work, and we make sure that everybody knows that we're doing the work, right, and all of that. But at the end of the day, actually, why do I keep using this end of the day cliche thing? But anyways, in the final analysis, as they say, we are Sisyphus, and heck, let's go with it, right? Let's embrace it. Let's push the boulder, knowing that we're going to push it again and again and again. Yeah. And I really appreciate this work, and I hope you do too. And if you want to continue, we can continue. But if you want to stop at this point, you're getting tired, and it's just you're like, kind of a thing, we can do that too.
Can I say that I wanted to respond to the systems and also to
Absolutely.
Amy was at, or Emily, okay, I'm sorry.
Emily.
So I'm absolutely working in the system against the system. My clients are all living in a cage awaiting the government to legally murder them, right? And as long as our system puts humans in cages, I'm going to work in it against it. I can't do that from the outside, right? Mm-hmm. I just can't, right? I just can't do it. But that's the only way, and I'm trying to work myself out of that, right? And it's very contradictory, right? Because if my clients had different lives, my life would not be funded by this, right? Because it's the same as if we abolish the police, I don't have a job. Because the police are who start that process, right? But I still say abolish the police, right? I still think we don't need police. We don't need them. They're not helpful, right? It's just not. So you have to look, in order to do it, that has to sit with you, that from both worlds, right? It has to sit with you in order to keep pushing through it. The other part is when you were talking about, you feel badly, people are working with people and helping people, but the way that America, or excuse me, the United States does minimizes the abuse and illness of animals. So being the model against that is still helping people, right? Because we all live here. They live here. So it's still the model. So I would encourage you to be peaceful with your call. That's really what it is, right? Be peaceful.
Oh, nice way of putting it.
Yeah,
I use that.
I was actually like thinking that, and we are kind of like Sisyphus, but I also think of us as like little raindrops in a bucket. And if, you think of every little raindrop, and it's really hard to see when it's first raining, like any difference. But eventually it rains a whole lot and the bucket's full. And so like, I kind of feel like, and I feel like we do have to divide and conquer. Like, I can't do it all either. Like, if I'm going to focus, like reading this book, The Sum of Us, is like exhausting. And then I think about, like, oh, I should do this and this and this. And it's like, but I can't, I'm human and I have to sleep and I have family and I have friends that I, owe my time to, and I'm not a superhuman. And so, if one person is working on getting people like out of the death penalty and another person is working on animals, which definitely do affect us and in the way that we abuse the earth, and abuse of animals and abusing the earth, and our own health is all tied up in all of that. And somebody else is working on something else, and trying to work on housing and figure out, how to anti-displacement and gentrification, and and then education of kids, and that's all, we it's like little bits, and eventually you fill up a bucket. And I just think also, like, I think back to, and I had to tell myself this every day, I think back to all of those people that I teach, all of the famous reformers of the 17 and 18 and 1900s, who, a lot of them never saw change. David Walker and all of the people who sunk their slave ships on the way from Africa to America. But at one point, something did change, and they didn't quit. And so at least, like, if they didn't quit and something tiny changed, and it's small, tiny steps, and it's overwhelming to continue it. But I feel like it's like we owe it to ourselves and owe it to them to continue on what they did, which is these tiny little ways in which they enacted a little bit of change. And it wasn't perfect. The 13th Amendment is not perfect, but they did see a written in the law something. And so, I feel like we, whether it's Sisyphus or a little drop in the rain bucket, we all have like that role to play. And eventually something does happen, and it's like creating that supportive environment. And I think just being at peace at that it is all interconnected. Our whole earth is connected. And one of the really bad things that we have done is think that it's okay to overfish, and that's not going to bite us. It's okay to kill sharks, and that's not going to harm our entire ecosystem. And, whatever it is, but we're all a system of one. And so it's a very dangerous road to go down. It's humans versus animals. Like, it's all together. It's all in the same direction.
I'd like to add I don't know if we're going to leave or not yet, but
no, we're still here.
Oh, good. So I actually appreciated what you said, Sarah, Mally, and you, Tony. And what it made me think of was when I worked in news and feeling disappointed, like what I was doing wasn't impacting and making a change, which is why I went into news, because I didn't like what I had seen about, Black and brown men and women. And so I did begin to feel sad and discouraged. I had anxiety, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm not changing this. And to Sarah's point, it made me recall and think what you said, like, people before me, plenty of people who've done the good fight for all of us and didn't see the change right away. And really, like you said, coming to peace with, while I'm doing my part, not getting discouraged, and still being my disruptive self, but at the core of who I am, I'm an empath. And I really care about all human beings genuinely, and really want us to all just kind of get along, for God's sake, and make the world truly, cliche-ish, but a better place, and just a peaceful place for all of us to have access to all these resources. So I appreciated what you all said. It made me, I was really upset at myself for a long time when I left news and media because of exactly that, thinking I didn't have an effect, but knowing that I did affect in some way with my push.
Yes. Well, shall we tackle another area, or shall we call it a day? What would you like to do? This is your forum. I'm at your service.
I'm willing to stay on, but I am, and anyone who can't, that's also freedom, right?
Yes. I will post the video of this meeting on the announcements later, but yeah, let's stay on. Let's continue talking. I mean, this is great. One of the things that I talked to, our Dean, Michael Rafanti, whom I've known for many years. At one point, I was his student in doctoral studies, just FYI. Was that, I understand that this program is primarily, sold as an online program, asynchronous, but the value of these Zoom meetings or some other modality, if it's a Skype, but Zoom, works the best. The value of these meetings is integral to the success of these seminars. So this is where we thrive as a community. Individually, online and everything, you guys are excellent thinkers, and you're committed, and your work ethic is impressive. You're doing the work, so no issues there. But when we get together like this, not only do we get to know each other a little bit, our idiosyncrasies are kind of like come out, and we appreciate one another. We see how we are so different, and yet we're working for the same thing. So one for all for one unit. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. All of those cliches really apply. And we actually penetrate through the surface, and we get to a point. At the end, we might think, well, we only scratched the surface, but isn't that the story of life anyways? We always end up scratching the surface. We always end up kind of like winging it, right? It's only when I know so much that I realize that I don't know shit, right? So let's get to a point. Let's keep working at the point where we realize, oh, we don't know anything, so we got to keep going. All right. I very much appreciate that you take the time on a Saturday and you make yourselves available, not only with your physical presence, but with your intellectual presence and the passion that you bring to these forums. And I can guarantee you, right? Not 100%, so don't come to me ask for money, but I guarantee you that it will bear fruit for us, not only just with this class, but life in general. All right, like just look at the insights that we just came up with. I mean, the affirmations that they came along, and it wasn't like kumbaya, let's all just be good buddies, and then later forget about each other and all that. But it's more like we're starting to build a community here. A community. I mean, you guys are cohorts. You're going to be working together beyond this class and so on. And hopefully I'll get to meet you all in person and press the flesh, right? And then we can joke and shoot the shit and all the rest of it. So I just wanted to say that. And I hope that it comes out with sincerity, because I really mean what I say. So
can I say, Dr. Kashani, can I just say,
please.
You were saying, and I agree with that. I do the work on typing in the discussion. I do my due diligence. I try my best. I would like to answer more of you. Like Sarah, I wanted to respond to you. You have beautiful posts. I want to respond to your posts. You responded to mine, and I feel bad that I can't. So I really enjoy. I really enjoy, and not only I really find this fruitful, like you said, this discussion. This is like what really happens, because sometimes when I'm reading and there's a discussion, I want to talk to Sarah, I want to talk to her, and I want to talk to him. It's like I can't. It's like because of time constraints and because I do my due diligence. I want to respond to you honestly and as best I can. I find myself writing for hours, and then it's like, dude, I gotta stop, and I can't do anything else. So I feel bad for not responding to everybody. Like I really wanted to respond to you, Sarah, and everybody else. I'm sorry. But I really do appreciate what, like you said, Dr. Chani, what we're having here. It's powerful, and I wish we could have more of it, because I think after 3 years of doing the discussion prompts, I think I might go insane. But
That's right.
I do appreciate you all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, I totally agree about these discussion or the Zoom session. Like the discussion forums are great, and I feel like, especially in regards to like reflecting on the content, like the readings and stuff, they're extremely valuable to hear everyone's perspectives. But there's something I feel like even more powerful about having, like, engaging in this way, because I can, instead of just reading like, what someone has written, which is still can be very informative and powerful, I feel like being able to see your faces and hear the passion in your voices, it just, it just feels more authentic. And at least for me, it kind of develops that sense of community, and it just feels really motivating and inspiring to kind of keep digging in and doing the work and learning. So I just thank you, Tony, for having this as part of your class, like, and I think, you know, because some classes might just have like a presentation and, you know, a few minutes for questions at the end or something like that. But I really like kind of the open forum of like, let's just talk, you know, like I like the emphasis on discussion and sharing, and you're creating that space for us to feel safe to have these conversations. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Without you, it wouldn't happen. I'll be talking to the camera.
Thank you
I
for
just,
taking up your power. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, right. Yes, go ahead, continue. Please.
I'd just like to second what everyone's saying. I typically don't feel very comfortable sharing with others in a Zoom format, but I love listening and listening to everyone and like hearing the inflection, hearing the passion and the back and forth and the resources has been really great. And this is like one of the features of an educational program that you know, I was sort of sad to be missing, was the collaboration amongst all of the students and the brainstorming together and, you know, developing new ideas. And so providing this space has been great. And I think we have more of them scheduled through the rest of the term. And it's exciting to be able to hear everyone's area of passion. And also to Emily's point earlier about, you know, each of us having our own like area of passion, for lack of a better word. You know, if we don't, like, if we're only working towards disrupting capitalism, then are we recognizing like the discrimination and the oppression that is feeding racism? Are we recognizing, or if we're only addressing racism, are we recognizing the things that have led to the abuse of animals or sexism or fascism or any of those things? So so I think one of the great things about this program is that we all come from different areas. A lot of people in this program are educators, like traditional educators. I'm not, but I like that many of us, even the educators, we have different perspectives, and we all kind of bring something new to the table. And this kind of forum helps us facilitate that.
Now, a couple of things. Typically, you know, 3 Zoom sessions is what we do, but I am willing to do more. So if you guys want to, I hope it's okay to refer to you as you guys. I know in this day and age, I have to be careful about pronouns, etc. You know, but since we're family, I'll just say you guys. If you guys are willing, I am willing too. We can do more than 3 sessions. So typically Saturdays are you know, work out best for most people. But if you want to change that, we can do that too. We try. I try to be a benevolent dictator and create a democratic situation here in this regard. The other thing is that after I read your prospectus, you know, proposals for your topic that you're going to focus on for your final paper, I will offer you, this is always optional, I will offer you a one-on-one Zoom session, as if, like, you know, you come into my office and or we'll go to a cafe and sit down and talk about the stuff and talk about your paper. So if you have any anxieties about, oh, did I do this right or did I do it wrong, and oh, what grade am I going to get, don't worry about that stuff. All right, just go with, you know, what you're doing. If you've already submitted, then you're done. If you haven't, you're still working on it and you're worried about, is it right or wrong? There's no right or wrong. It's just, you know, your topic. And I'll let you know if you like say, hey, you know, Mr. XYZ, you're way off, you know, I'll say that, and then we'll talk and get that rolling. So the idea is that you propose the topic, and then we can have that conversation, the one-on-one. The one-on-one, it's always productive. If you don't want to have the one-on-one, that's perfectly okay too. I don't want to force you into, this is this is your thing, right? And you're paying all this tuition to be part of this program where you can have a hand in it, right? So,
Thank you for saying that, because I definitely am. The one thing that I'm having a hard time with this program, like with the 2 classes so far, is like how much it is like totally up to us what to write about. And so like I definitely have a lot of anxiety about the ambiguousness of it. I can't say the other word right now. But so, I was kind of like, man, am I just like totally off base with my idea? Like, is that, so I very much appreciate the possibility of, after I submit what I have, to being able to talk it out with you, and just to kind of make sure I'm on the right track before I start really digging into the actual research and writing a very long paper. So thank you. That's, on one hand, it's been really stressful, like kind of the being completely on our own in terms of like determining what content we're going to write about and whatnot. But it's also been really amazing getting like the support from all of the professors, and how willing everyone has been to guide us. So thank you.
we try to walk the talk, right?
Yeah.
So
Can
as
I ask for clarification?
Yes, please. Yes. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering, for those one-on-ones, do we get in touch with you, or is this something you're going to communicate again?
Oh, okay. So here's how it works. I will read your stuff and then send you an email. When I return, when you go to the gradebook, you see that it's been returned to you. I'll give you a quick comment and say like, hey, this is great. It fits the framework of what we're doing. Let's have a Zoom session. And you let me know what works for you. Then I schedule it, right? And then we work it out. I've never had issues where we couldn't work it out, so it'll work out. So just you have to give me time to be able to read everything, and then as the way I do it is first come first serve. As they come in, I look at it and send you a note says let's get together, and then we get together. Now, if you miss the deadline, also don't lose any sleep over it. It happens, right? So you can't do it by Sunday, that's fine. Do it within the next week, right? And get it in. Don't worry about the format. I'm not going to be like, punishing you and saying, oh, this is doctoral level. What is this? Why did you write it like an essay? This is not acceptable, all that kind of stuff. But of course, you don't want to just be out there and say, hey, you know what, I was farting around with my buddies and I thought, it'd be cool to kind of deal with, animal liberation. So what do you say? That's not going to cut it either, right? So I'm sure I have great confidence in your abilities. I mean, you guys are in a doctoral program. That means you've gone through the bullshit of having to learn, the formatting and the style and writing papers and submissions and dealing with deadlines. And you all have lives, complicated, complex lives. So you know how to juggle things and then meet where life, meets you. So I'll meet you where you are, and you will meet me where I am, which is in the here and now.
Can I just say, Dr. Sonic, thank you for being real and just understanding, because I appreciate that in the doctorate program so much. Because
thank you for saying that. Let me make sure I am real.
No.
By the way, there's one requirement. This is very serious, very serious. One requirement. You are required to laugh at all of my corny jokes. They're saying, nope, I won't. I will not laugh.
That's not freedom.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. I did say earlier, but it's democracy. I did say earlier, but I'm a benevolent dictator. Come on. Okay, so do you want to talk about some other stuff, or you want to go to the barbecue?
Somebody bring something good. Bring something up good, somebody. Or I'll bring it up.
What about this topical Shakespeare reading? Did you appreciate that paper? Did you think that that was useful? Is that something you do? Not with Shakespeare, of course, but with other things.
Was that the one talking about riffing? Or was that the other one?
That was the riffing one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that with my kids. I didn't call it riffing, but like we just like I'm supposed to be teaching them math and science, and sometimes we just talking about something. And we say a key word or a topic they talk about, and we get to these tangents, and we get to really, really good discussions. Sometimes the best ever. And I'm like, whoa, what happened to the lesson? But sometimes that's just the way you go, you know. So yeah, I do riffing. I do. I didn't know. I didn't call it riffing, but you know, that's it's really good. And with circle time, especially with circle time, it really works effectively.
Yeah. So can somebody share an example of their riffing? We did some riffing here.
Well,
Heather. Yeah, Heather wants to say something.
Oh, I don't have to. For me, my whole day is riffing, right? 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, they just like do their thing and they say what they want to say and you go through it, right? And so I feel like I've got this like master level of being able to connect all these different pieces and synthesize them down to say like, I think what you're saying is this, right? And what's interesting for me so I've taught middle school and I've taught early childhood. The in between, I don't really understand those kiddos in the in between. I'll be honest. I think if you don't understand your students' humor, then it's hard to teach them. And I don't like get third graders very well, their humor. Anyways, and so what's interesting about the difference between the riffing in what I've noticed in my experience with middle schoolers and early childhood is that for early childhood, I'm teaching them the critical thinking process and I'm teaching them to like connect things to other things. And then so by the time they get to further on in the year, they can pull all these parts together and then they start we can start riffing about the content and not just about like my cousin has a duck, you know. And then in middle school, what's really interesting is they use all of that knowledge, but don't see how it's connected. And so you can help them make those connections and say like, absolutely, that's connected. Of course it is. And so that's been interesting. And like Andreas was saying, the way that those things just sort of happen naturally and you give the kiddos the freedom to do that, that's where like the really solid learning and understanding and connections with each other and connections with the text or with the assignment or with whatever it is, really makes sense. Something that comes to mind as we were sitting around talking about, this is with my former 5th graders, talking about, I was reading Sylvia and Aki to them out loud. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book. It's about Aki Munamuto and Sylvia Mendez and their relationship as they grew. Aki's family was interned in Japanese internment camps, and the Mendez family, who were immigrants from Mexico, rented their farm. And at that time, the Mendez family fought for their daughter to go to a white school, and it was the legal first step to desegregating schools, or one of them. Anyways, it's a true story. It's a lovely early or middle reader book, but we were talking about it, and one of the kiddos, I work in a predominantly white, very small independent school. We have a solid 75 students every year. My current classroom is 8, just to give you some background knowledge. And one of the kiddos, they always make this connection. They're like, I wouldn't be able to go to school with point out, the like 2 or 3 kiddos in the room, right? And so I'm not really interested in building knowledge or resilience on the backs of brown and black students. And so being able to like shift that narrative and say, you're noticing different people's skin colors, and that's really extraordinary, and all of those things. And and then moving the conversation forward. But I think it also like opens these doors for kids to make connections with each other, which is what we're doing here, which I feel like is the most important part, because then it connects to that place where you feel safe, right? And that safety piece is so important to being able to learn for freedom. And that's what riffing does. It creates this safety space. I'm not a big, this is like probably unpopular, but I don't love Shakespeare, or I get the work of it and how important it is. But I think that if Shakespeare was never taught in high school, that people would be okay. Nobody get mad at me. You can't get mad at me. It's okay. We can disagree. But there's other stuff, but, to my very long-winded point is that I think that those moments where you're creating connection with each other about things that are very different, or allow you to show what you know without being in that box. And that's what riffing does, is just opens that up for everybody to really connect and to really be a part of what's happening and to own their own learning. And that allows kiddos to really think about things in a different way, rather than like the canon, which you're sort of having to follow. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, I agree with Heather, and it gives the kids, it makes them think in their own reality, in their real world. So it makes education real, and it makes them interested, and it's a community, it's a safe space, and it's powerful, and it's what was I going to say? It's what's happening here. You let us we let us take a responsibility for our education. You kind of like, what's that? A teacher is not a sage on stage, is a guide on the side. Just basically let the kids take over, but just when you need to intervene, you swerve it back where it needs to be if need be. But it's a beautiful thing, and yeah. I like how it gave us there's a concrete example of how we can actually affect change in the classroom.
Yes. Riffing creates a safety, safe space, right? It builds the safe space, as Heather was pointing out. Also, you're right, Andreas. It makes it real, right, for the kids, or it could be adults too, not just kids. It teaches the learner contextualization and how to contextualize. This is one of the areas of weakness in our education system. We don't know as teachers how to teach contextualizations. We do it, demonstrate it, but how do you teach it? And some of these techniques can be very helpful. Of course, making it real with their real lives and the contemporary examples. And it doesn't have to be Shakespeare, of course. And yes, we can certainly do without Shakespeare, but then it's out there, and it's part of the canon, what have you.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so my students did a project. So it all started my first year of teaching. My students asked me, like, is there modern day slavery after we got done learning about slavery? And I said, well, actually, yes. So we embarked on this whole journey of like learning about like some of the modern day like instances of slavery, which evolved into a project where they got to pick a topic that they wanted to do, like a Being the Change project. And so they all got to pick different topics, and a lot of it was climate change and LGBTQIA plus rights and all sorts of topics. And so then what I did, I came in one day and said, let's think about all the ways that they're connected. So I love like connection circles. And so and little webs on the board. So we drew on the board, and we're kind of thinking about like all of the different ways in which like they all kind of tied together. And it was just really neat to like kind of visually like connect them. And then they actually like came up with a lot, like as we got started, it kind of morphed and we just kind of went wherever it was. And it was a really neat way for them to start to see like how all of these things, and a lot of it boils down to like poverty. So climate change affects people who are in poverty more disproportionately, and it ties into homelessness and ties into, just access to mental health care. And so it was just really a neat and powerful moment at just kind of making sure they kind of understood that it's like all connected and that our whole system is connected, whatever issue they chose.
Great. Oh.
I'm kind of not sure if this is riffing, so I'm interested in some feedback. But I love creating curriculum that teaches from many angles. An example is I live in the Pacific Northwest, where the salmon are an integral part of the land.
Mhm.
And I also, of course, work with young children. So from, again, the Waldorf perspective. So working with song, working with like active circle work, developmental movements that relate to the journey of the salmon, with traditional indigenous story that tells the life cycle of the salmon from the more archetypal landscape, and then going to them and serenading them, but observing with the intention of serenading, and that in my mind, that kind of like coming from life from different angles builds the opportunity for the children to do the riffing, to take those experiences and integrate them into their lives, into their being, so that when down the pipeline comes water quality, or the life cycle of the orcas, and the orcas here are going extinct because the salmon are going extinct because of the way that we are treating the waters and the air, the earth, the people, that there's a foundation for them to build off of. Is that, I'm not sure if that's in the same vein, but
Well,
that's
it's the same realm. Yeah.
I'd like to share. So I do teach just one class at my alma mater, but my full-time job is as an athletic trainer. So I do a lot of like rehabs for injuries in the training room with my athletes, and they're high school kids. I work at a high school / junior high, and I found that there is this space for learning outside of traditional school hours, and that I can still act as an educator to them, whether that's specific to their injury and I'm telling them why we're doing a certain exercise, or if our conversation just kind of gets sidetracked and we start just talking about more general life-related things and important concepts to understand how to be a good person, whatever. I've been part of those conversations, and I've had, sorry, they're crazy. I've had a lot of students, once they become seniors, make comments to me about how like, oh, I swear I've learned more in the training room than I've learned in the classroom, because it's just it's a much more laid back environment where we can have a dialogue. And I also have the power to be like, we're not going to judge here. We're not bullying here. We're not doing any of that. Like, let this person say their piece, and then you can tell your opinion. And it just creates this really, what the learning environment really should be, I think. And I love engaging with the students in that way, because that falls outside of, what I was hired to do. But at the end of the day, I'm still an adult in these kids' lives trying to set them up for success in the future, so kind of creating the space for it to be a good place to do the riffing. It has been honestly one of my favorite parts of my job, is being able to have that freedom to do that.
Oh, wonderful.
I think I'm gonna follow up that I think this is riffing, if I understand it correctly, but I have to do it for work every day, because the first topic is this person has been convicted of some sort of at least one murder and sentenced to death. So the line, that baseline is the topic, right? But my role on that team is to now unpack multi-generational life histories of all aspects, from education to medical to to mental health, to neighborhood, socioeconomics, whether or not they lived in a food desert, all of the things that shift from this person has been convicted of murder and sentenced to death, and oh, here's all the things that got them here. And so you flesh out every idea to mitigate and humanize, right, the client. So at all times when I'm interviewing, I interview thousands of people that had any kind of connection at some point. I don't care if they've sat together at a bus stop, and take all of these different ideas from the baseline of, yes, this person is convicted of murder and sentenced to death. Also, their father was formerly enslaved, or their grandfather was formerly enslaved, and the cycle of abuse that extends from chattel slavery has carried itself into. So I think that that's riffing, where you take the idea, or there's the concept, and now you have to explore that and see where it came from and where it's going, right? Change where it's going. So I don't know for sure, but I think that's what it is.
Can I ask you something, Molly? How often are you successful with getting them off death row?
So the cases are long, right? I can tell you that I've only been with the federal government for a year and a half. I did so, I did it privately, on my own. And in 1 year, one refused to be, we had to go through the requirements. He begged the 3 trial benches to sentence him to death, like the 3 judges. He begged them because he had killed 5 people that he loved within 24 hours and couldn't live with why. And then the other, so he was sentenced to death at his request. And then my other client, so I was doing pre-trial work then. And so the other client, death was taken off the table in a minimal sentence. In the federal government, people in my office, I just gotta say, my office is a bunch of kick-ass humanitarians. Mm-hmm. So we get people off the row all the time. To that end, the road to that is long. My youngest case, or because we don't get it till it's on appeal. My newest or youngest case has been on the road for 8 years. So, and they will be my client throughout, even once, if I get them off the road, right? Like they will continue to be my client because it's a holistic approach. It's actually required by law. So every defense team has to have at least 4 members, a lead trial, a second chair trial, a mitigation investigator, and some sort of mental health expert, and a paralegal. Mm-hmm. And it gets muddied, but that's at minimum, right? So they remain your client holistically. I just got a text from the client I was just talking about, his mom, letting me know that she had sent him an email, and he was not, because I'm finally released to do field work, back into travel. So tomorrow I get on the road and I'm going to Philly to visit all my clients. But just to say, hey, I'm so glad she's coming. Make sure she's still coming. Like I just got a text from his mom. So they stay my client though forever. Like the client that I got off the road, or got death off the table in Ohio, I talk to his mom probably once a month, right? So that's yes, we are successful.
But which brings my next question. You spent, like you said, for years, right? It must be hard, like if they're put to death. That must be just.
I have not yet had a client put to death, but we did experience at our office. So remember when Trump and his murderous crew decided to reinstitute the federal death penalty? Just after 17 years of not implementing it, and he killed, I think, 17 people. Well, the the woman who had killed a mom and took her baby. She was mentally ill. That was another of my colleagues. That was her client. And that at that moment, I needed to really think about that, because I'm the only person in the office now, it was me and her, who hasn't experienced their client actually being executed. That, I don't know if I can, I don't know how I'm gonna deal with that. Fortunately, Pennsylvania has a moratorium on, so it's not abolished, but the Governor Wolf, it's a moratorium. He won't execute anyone.
Yeah.
Sorry to bring that somber. Is that
Okay. Well, folks, it's almost 1:30. We're at 2.5 hours into this. I think we should just, it's hard to say goodbye, but it's not a goodbye. It's see you later, alligator kind of a moment. All right. So thank you again for making the time, being here, being present, and putting your heart and soul into the discussions. I will put the video up on announcements, sometime later, hopefully before the end of next week. And if you want to revisit what everybody said, then there it will be. Any last minute questions? Any concerns, anything? Well, enjoy the rest of your weekend.
lovely chatting with you all?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you so much. Bye.